I never thought my dream home would turn into a battlefield. 5 years ago, I poured every ounce of sweat and savings into building a house on land that was rightfully mine, surveyed, signed, and sealed. But then came the neighbor from hell, a so-called HOA Karen, who stormed into town with fake papers and wild accusations, screaming that my entire house sat on her property. She gave me 30 days to demolish my home or face the consequences. At first, I thought it was just paranoia, but when the boundary markers started vanishing, and I caught her at night with a crowbar threatening to tear everything down, I realized this wasn't just a feud, it was war. And the truth we uncovered in court would blow her entire life apart. When I first moved out to the edge of Rio Mesa, a quiet desert town in northern New Mexico, I thought I had finally found peace. The land I bought wasn't just dirt and rocks, it was freedom. After years of working as an architect in Albuquerque, dealing with tight deadlines, greedy developers, and city noise that never seemed to fade, I was ready for quiet. My plot of land stretched across 4 acres of sandy soil and scattered mesquite trees, perched just far enough from town to feel private but close enough that groceries and high-speed internet were still within reach. I had the land surveyed not once but twice, hired licensed professionals, and kept every single certified document in a locked fireproof box. My dream wasn't just to build a house, it was to build a legacy, something solid, something that no one could ever take away. Or so I believed. The house rose from the ground piece by piece, each beam chosen carefully, each stone placed with intention. I didn't outsource the work like many did. I sweated for it, blistered my hands, and laid down roots with every nail I hammered. When it was done, standing on my porch at sunset, I felt something I hadn't felt in decades: calm. The nearest neighbor was technically the desert, until, of course, she arrived. Her name was Linda Carver, but in town she quickly earned a nickname, Karen of the Mesa. She appeared one fall morning in a dusty white SUV, dragging behind it a trailer that rattled like bones. At first, I thought she was just another retiree looking to enjoy desert sunsets and birdsongs. But Linda wasn't here for peace. She was here for control. I first met her when she stopped by uninvited, walking right up my driveway like she already owned it. She had the look, sharp blonde bob that never seemed to move in the wind, oversized sunglasses even though it was nearly dusk, and a voice that carried the tone of someone used to giving orders. She announced she had purchased the lot beside mine through special channels and that construction would begin immediately. I nodded politely, offered a handshake. She ignored it. At first, I didn't think much of her brisk attitude. People come and go, and in rural towns you learn to live and let live. But her build went up at a speed that didn't make sense. Within a week, a skeleton frame stood tall, hammered together by crews who never seemed to file permits or post notices. By the time the county even updated their website to show a change in ownership, she had siding on the walls and a deck jutting out toward my property. That was the beginning of the tension. Linda started with small complaints. My fence, she said, was obnoxiously high and blocked her view of the mountains. My driveway gravel, she insisted, was loud and disruptive when I backed out in the mornings. Even my wind chimes, she claimed, were disturbing the wildlife. I laughed it off at first, tried to be civil, even offered her a cup of coffee one morning when she caught me outside. She didn't take it. Instead, she stared at the steam like it was a personal insult. But soon, the complaints escalated into something more sinister. One evening after a storm, I was walking along the south boundary of my property, checking on my solar panels, when I noticed something was wrong. One of the old iron stakes driven into the ground during the original survey was gone. Not bent, not rusted, not fallen over gone. Pulled clean out of the earth, as if someone wanted to erase the line and pretend it had never existed. My stomach tightened. I replaced it quietly with a new stake, this time marking the exact GPS coordinates on my phone. I didn't say a word to anyone, but I felt the shift. This wasn't about wind chimes anymore. Days later, it happened. I was trimming brush near the fence line when I heard footsteps crunching on the gravel. I turned and saw Linda storming toward me. She wasn't empty-handed. In one fist, she clutched a thick folder, manila yellow, stuffed with papers that bulged like they carried the weight of law. You think you're clever, don't you? She snapped before I could even greet her. I wiped sweat from my brow, tried to keep my voice calm. Good morning, Linda. What's the matter? She didn't answer the question. Instead, she thrust the folder at me like it was radioactive. Inside were crookedly printed satellite images, hand-drawn diagrams that looked like a middle school project, and survey summaries with no county stamps or signatures. At the top of one document was a logo that read Desert Land Advisory, followed in tiny print by the words, "Not a licensed surveyor." Linda's eyes burned into me. Your house is sitting on my land, 6 feet in at least. You have 30 days to demolish it, or I take you to court. I stared at her, stunned, almost laughing at the absurdity. You're serious. Does this look like a joke? She snapped, lips trembling, face flushed red with righteous anger. I closed the folder and handed it back carefully. Linda, I have every certified document, every county-approved survey. My house is exactly where it should be. Mistaken, she barked, cutting me off. You've been stealing since day one. Your gutter, your AC unit, they're on my lot, inch by inch. You've been encroaching, and I won't stand for it. That was the moment it clicked. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a siege. She wasn't just trying to scare me, she was rewriting reality. The following days grew stranger. Cars I didn't recognize began slowing down near my driveway. Beat-up trucks, old sedans, even a Subaru with an HOA sticker on the back. Locals, not tourists. They watched, whispered. My neighbor down the road, an older woman named Marcy, stopped me while I collected my mail. I don't want to alarm you, she said carefully, but Linda's been telling folks your whole house is illegal, that you knew it all along. I laughed bitterly. That's news to me. Well, Marcy continued, glancing around nervously, she's been hinting she might have to take drastic measures. Just thought you should know. My blood ran cold. It was clear now Linda wasn't just spreading lies. She was preparing a narrative, laying the groundwork so that when the confrontation hit the courts or the sheriff's office, she would look like the victim. I went home that night, pulled out every single document from my fireproof box, and combed through them. Survey maps, county approvals, title deeds, it was all there, clean and ironclad. But a strange feeling settled over me. I realized that in small towns, sometimes it doesn't matter how strong your proof is. What matters is who shouts louder, longer, and Linda was already shouting. And I knew then I was in for a fight that would test not only my patience, but my very grip on reality. The morning after Marcy's warning, I stood on my porch sipping coffee, staring at the desert horizon, trying to convince myself that Linda's accusations were just empty noise. But the pit in my stomach said otherwise. In small towns like Rio Mesa, reputation spread faster than wildfire. If Linda was painting me as a land thief, people would start believing it. And once the idea took root, it wouldn't matter how many stamp surveys I waved in their faces. Truth had a way of getting buried under gossip. Within a week, the tension escalated. Linda's house grew at an alarming pace. There were no inspection notices taped to her windows, no county officials checking in, nothing but a rotating crew of workers hammering away. By the time Christmas lights appeared on her eaves, the place looked fully lived in. And it was hard to ignore the deck massive, sprawling, jutting out suspiciously close to my fence line. I measured it with my own eyes every time I walked by. And something told me that deck wasn't just brushing the boundary. It was on my property. But Linda wasn't content with building fast. She wanted control. One afternoon, she caught me outside cleaning leaves from my gutters. She marched up to the fence, lips pinched tight. "Your fence," she barked, "is illegal. It blocks my view of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. County code requires shared vistas." I blinked at her. "Shared vistas? That's not a thing." "It is," she insisted. "And your wind chimes," she pointed toward the porch where they swayed lazily in the breeze, "are disturbing the natural wildlife patterns." I stared at her, caught between amusement and disbelief. "Linda, they're 3 pieces of metal tubing. The quail don't care." Her sunglasses reflected my face back at me. "You'll see," she muttered before storming off. The next day, a handwritten note appeared taped to my mailbox. It read, Remove the chimes and lower your fence within 10 days or I'll file a nuisance complaint. No signature, but I didn't need one. I thought maybe she was bluffing. But then the whisper network started again. At the hardware store, a clerk I'd known for years asked casually, "Hey, are you really building over your lot line at the diner?" 2 men at the counter went silent when I walked in. Even Marcy, normally kind and chatty, avoided eye contact the next time she passed me on the road. Linda was poisoning the well, and she was doing it fast. But the breaking point came one evening just after dusk. I was walking along the southern fence line, flashlight in hand, when the beam landed on bare earth. My stomach dropped. The new survey stake I'd driven in, complete with GPS coordinates, was gone. Again. Not bent, not buried, just gone. And that's when I heard it, the crunch of gravel under boots. I swung the light up, and there she was, Linda, striding toward me with that same manila folder clutched tight in her hands. "You think you can play games," she snarled before I could speak. "I have proof. Your house is over my boundary." She shoved the folder at me, and I flipped it open. Same garbage as before, cheap satellite printouts, diagrams drawn with shaky lines, survey notes unsigned and uncertified. At the top of one page was a laughable logo, Desert Land Advisory, not a licensed surveyor. I handed it back. "Linda, this isn't valid. I have county-stamped documents. Licensed surveyors, my home is exactly where it should be." Her face flushed crimson. "You're stealing from me that gutter of yours, 6 feet into my lot. That AC unit over the line. You've been inching onto my property since the day you broke ground." "Linda," I said carefully, lowering my voice, "I haven't moved a single thing since construction. My property is solid. If you're concerned, we can hire a neutral surveyor, someone the county recommends. 30 days. She cut in sharply. "You have 30 days to demolish your house, or I'll see you in court." She turned on her heel, muttering something about precedent and restitution as she stomped back toward her trailer. I stood there in the dark, heart pounding, the desert air suddenly colder than before. That night, I couldn't sleep. I pulled every document out of my fireproof box and spread them across my kitchen table, certified plats, boundary confirmation letters, GPS maps. The lines were clear. My home sat well within my parcel. There was no question. And yet, Linda had managed to twist the narrative so thoroughly that I could feel it if this went to court without fresh evidence. It might not matter how solid my paperwork was. She was setting the stage, and I was already cast as the villain. I made a decision then. I wouldn't wait for her to drag me into a legal circus built on lies. I'd get the truth nailed down, indisputable and ironclad. The next morning, I called in reinforcements. Not just any surveyor, I wanted the best. I tracked down a firm out of Santa Fe, known for using drones, GPS, and laser scanners. When I explained my situation over the phone, the lead surveyor, Miguel Ortiz, chuckled grimly. "Sounds like you've got yourself a boundary bully. Don't worry. We'll get you numbers they can't argue with." 10 days later, Miguel's team was on my land, tripods and fluorescent flags in hand. They walked every inch. From the boulder on the north line to the arroyo cutting across the back edge, I watched nervously, feeling like I was waiting for a verdict. Miguel himself came out on day 3, crouched near the edge of Linda's sprawling deck, and muttered under his breath, "Huh." "What kind of huh is that?" I asked. "The kind that means we're finding surprises," he said, scribbling notes before moving on. He didn't explain further. When the report was finally ready, Miguel spread it across my dining table like a blackjack dealer. His finger traced the map slowly, tapping each shaded section. "Your house," he said firmly, "is exactly where it should be. Not a single inch out of bounds." Relief washed through me, but before I could celebrate, he moved his finger to Linda's house. This, though, is where it gets interesting. The shaded overlay showed her deck, part of her living room, and even her detached shed, all spilling over the boundary line onto my property. 22 feet. In fact, Miguel looked me dead in the eye. "She's been living on your land for over 3 years. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the table. "You're serious." "As serious as the county clerk," he replied, sliding over the notarized, GPS-certified report. "She filed her permits with outdated data. That's fraud. And now, You have proof." In that moment, I realized the game had changed. Linda thought she was pushing me into a corner. She thought she could bully me into tearing down my own home. But the truth was a weapon, and now I had it loaded. The moment Miguel's words sank in, my world tilted. For weeks, I'd been painted as the intruder, the thief who supposedly built a house on someone else's land. But here it was, laid out in ink and signatures. Linda's deck, her shed, even part of her living room sat smack in the middle of my property, not inches 22 feet. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was trespass, fraud, and arrogance rolled into one. That night, I barely slept. I kept staring at the notarized report spread across my kitchen table. The paper felt heavy, like a weapon, but the weight of relief was quickly replaced by something sharper dread, because I knew Linda wasn't the type to roll over when confronted with facts. She doubled down. She always did. 2 nights later, my phone buzzed at 2:43 a.m. The motion sensor on a trail cam I'd hidden near the fence had gone off. Bleary-eyed, I opened the live feed. The night vision lens glowed green and grainy, and there she was. Linda, in sweatpants and a hoodie, flashlight in one hand, crowbar in the other. She stood hunched over one of the fresh survey stakes Miguel's crew had planted. With a grunt, she wrenched it out of the ground and hurled it into the desert brush. I froze, heart thundering in my chest. The audio was faint but clear enough. She hissed into her phone, "If this guy doesn't move his damn house, I'll tear the whole thing down myself." I rewound the clip, saved it, backed it up to 3 different folders: local, cloud, encrypted. My hands shook, but my mind was suddenly clear. She wasn't just crazy, she was dangerous. By dawn, I knew I couldn't handle this alone. I called my attorney, Carla Ruiz, a woman with a reputation for shredding liars in court. She listened quietly as I explained the situation, then said flatly, "Send me everything. The survey, the video, the permit history if you can dig it up." I emailed her the files. Within an hour, she called back. "This isn't just a boundary dispute," she said. "This is harassment, fraud, and criminal trespass. But if we want to crush her in court, we need a pattern. If she's pulled this stunt before, it'll show intent." Her words lit a spark in my head. Linda had always struck me as rehearsed, like she was reciting lines she'd used on someone else. So, I did what anyone does when they smell a bigger story. I Googled her. It didn't take long. A property record from Utah popped up under her maiden name, Linda Harmon. She'd owned a house there 5 years earlier, in a tightly controlled HOA community. My pulse quickened as I clicked through forums and archives. And then I founded a neighborhood complaint board dated 4 years ago. Thread title reading, "HOA President Sued for Boundary Harassment." I devoured the comments. Neighbors accused her of filing false reports, removing property stakes with tools, and even threatening to bulldoze a woman's garden shed for encroaching on community space. The parallels were eerie, almost identical to what she was doing to me. The case had gone to small claims court. She lost. Badly. Then she sold her house, changed her last name, and moved out of state. I leaned back in my chair, cold creeping up my spine. She wasn't just a difficult neighbor. She was a serial offender, a professional bully who reinvented herself each time the law caught up. When I forwarded the forum screenshots and court summary to Carla, her reply was immediate. "This is gold. We're not just defending you, we're building a case for fraud with intent. Let me draft the complaint. In the meantime, install more cameras." So I did. 4 more, in fact. One disguised as a birdhouse, another as a sprinkler head, a third tucked beneath the porch eave with infrared, and my personal favorite, a hollow ceramic owl my aunt had once gifted me, now repurposed as surveillance. The desert would be my witness, but surveillance wasn't enough. I needed to push back in a way Linda couldn't ignore. So, I printed Miguel's certified survey results, laminated them, and nailed them to a wooden post right at the boundary where Linda's deck crossed onto my land. Below it, I added a note in block letters. "Any attempt to remove this marker will be considered criminal trespass. Evidence already recorded." The next morning, I caught her staring from her deck, arms folded tight, sunglasses hiding her eyes. She didn't come down, didn't speak, but I could feel the fury rolling off her. For the first time in weeks, I almost smiled. Still, her silence didn't last. 3 days later, I noticed a sedan parked at the far edge of my property. A man in khakis stood beside it, snapping photos of my house with a long lens camera. I walked up, asked what he was doing. He cleared his throat nervously. Independent assessor, he said, documenting encroachments for a private client. He didn't have to say who. That was it. Enough games. Carla filed the lawsuit the very next afternoon. Unlawful encroachment, fraudulent permitting, destruction of property, and willful harassment. We attached every shred of evidence Miguel's survey, the camera footage, the Utah court history, and we added the cherry on top, the video of Linda at 2:43 a.m., crowbar in hand, threatening to demolish my home. I'd brace myself for a drawn-out process, maybe months of hearings. But to my surprise, the court scheduled our case swiftly. Word traveled fast in Rio Mesa, and by the time the first hearing approached, half the town already knew. At the diner, someone whispered, "That's the guy with the crazy neighbor," as I walked in. Even the county clerk gave me a sympathetic nod when I showed up for paperwork. The day of the hearing, I stood outside the courthouse, heart pounding. Carla, calm as ever, adjusted her blazer and said, "Remember, we have facts. She has stories, and judges don't rule on stories." But when Linda arrived, she didn't come alone. 2 men followed her, each lugging oversized tubes of documents. She strutted into the courthouse like she was preparing for war. And as the doors closed behind her, I realized this wasn't just about property anymore. For Linda, it was about power, image, and control. For me, it was about survival. And the truth was about to explode in front of everyone. The inside of the Rio Mesa courthouse was nothing like the dramatic courtrooms you see on TV. The walls were beige, the carpet smelled faintly of dust, and the air hummed with the quiet shuffle of papers. Yet, despite the dull setting, my pulse hammered in my ears like a drum. This was it, the showdown. When the bailiff called our case, we filed into the courtroom. Carla walked beside me, her presence steady, like a shield I didn't know I needed. Across the aisle, Linda sat stiffly, lips pursed, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown. Behind her, the 2 men she'd brought hauled out rolls of diagrams, balancing them clumsily on the bench. The judge, a stern woman named Judge Morales, entered and called the session to order. She wasted no time. Carla rose first, introducing our case with crisp clarity. "Your Honor, this is not merely a boundary dispute. This is a matter of deliberate fraud, harassment, and unlawful encroachment." She slid a flash drive across the bench. "We have survey data, GPS logs, video evidence, and notarized documents that prove my client's house is fully within his lot and that the defendant's structures extend 22 feet onto his property." The judge raised an eyebrow. "Proceed." Carla laid out Miguel's survey report with the precision of a surgeon. She pointed to the shaded overlays, explained the coordinates, and highlighted the notarization stamps. Then she queued up the video footage of Linda yanking a survey stake out of the ground at 2:43 a.m., crowbar gleaming under the flashlight beam. The audio filled the room. "If this guy doesn't move his damn house, I'll tear the whole thing down myself." A murmur rippled through the small gallery. I caught the flicker of shock on the clerk's face. Even the judge leaned back slightly. Linda's turn came next. She stood, chin high, voice brimming with manufactured authority. "Your Honor, the plaintiff's evidence is manipulated. My home is not in violation. I have proof." She gestured dramatically at her 2 companions. The first man, wiry and pale, shuffled forward carrying a stack of papers. "I am a boundary consultant with 20 years of experience," he declared. Carla rose smoothly. "Are you a licensed surveyor in the state of New Mexico?" The man hesitated. "No." "But certified by any geodetic association?" "No, but I've consulted." "So you are not qualified to submit legally binding survey documents," Carla pressed. "Not legally." "No." "Then I move to strike this testimony as inadmissible," Carla said, turning to the judge. "Granted," Judge Morales said without looking up from her notes. A hush fell over the room. Linda's face flushed crimson. She motioned for her second expert to take the stand. This one wore khakis and a golf shirt, his demeanor smug. Carla asked one question. Are you in any way employed by or affiliated with Ms. Carver? The man cleared his throat. I handle payroll for her consulting firm. Carla tilted her head. So, you're her accountant, technically. The judge pinched the bridge of her nose. Do you have any witnesses with actual surveying credentials? Ms. Carver, Linda's voice rose. I have data, and I have reason to believe the plaintiff's survey was manipulated. Carla stood again, unfazed. Your Honor, we have not only Miguel Ortiz's notarized report, but also GPS logs, drone overlays, and county plat confirmations. She tapped her folder. We also have proof that Ms. Carver submitted permit applications using obsolete data from a non-licensed advisory firm. That is fraud. The judge's eyes narrowed. Ms. Carver, did you remove a boundary stake belonging to the plaintiff? Linda folded her arms. I was correcting a fraudulent installation. Did you threaten to destroy his home? I was speaking metaphorically. Carla signaled the bailiff. The video replayed, Linda's voice sharp and venomous. I'll tear the whole thing down myself. The silence afterward was damning. Judge Morales set her pen down. Ms. Carver, I strongly advise you to retain actual legal counsel. I am representing myself, she snapped. Carla raised an eyebrow. Of course you are. What followed was a slow unraveling of Linda's case. County inspectors confirmed her permits cited outdated plats, missing parcel ID numbers. Miguel himself testified, walking the court through the GPS coordinates and pointing out the exact overlay where her deck and shed spilled into my lot. Linda tried to interrupt, but the judge silenced her with a single gavel strike. By the end of the hearing, the outcome felt inevitable, yet I didn't let myself breathe until the judge delivered her ruling days later. On a crisp Tuesday morning, I stood once more in that beige courtroom. Judge Morales' voice cut through the air, steady and final. This court finds the defendant, Ms. Linda Carver, guilty of property encroachment, fraudulent permitting, destruction of marked boundaries, and making threats of property damage. The defendant is ordered to pay $165,000 in civil damages, including attorney's fees, and to demolish all portions of her structure that extend onto the plaintiff's land within 90 days at her own expense. The gavel slammed. Linda's jaw trembled, her face pale as stone. Outside the courthouse, a small crowd had gathered. A reporter asked me for a statement. I declined, but someone snapped a photo of me holding Miguel's laminated survey map. Within days, the story hit local news. Neighbor ordered to demolish home built on stolen land. I thought maybe that would be the end. Justice served. Case closed. But Linda wasn't finished yet, not by a long shot. Because when people like her lose, they don't retreat quietly. They plot. They burn. And I had a sick feeling she wasn't done lighting fires. The judgment should have been the end. 90 days to tear down the parts of her house that sat on my land. Fines to pay. Restitution awarded. I should have been able to sleep peacefully that night, knowing the law was on my side. But with someone like Linda, logic and order didn't work. She wasn't just stubborn, she was consumed by the idea that rules applied only when they favored her. The first week after the ruling, she kept a low profile. Her blinds stayed drawn, her driveway empty. For a moment, I thought maybe the fight had drained her, that she'd lick her wounds and move on. But then small things began happening, little reminders that she wasn't finished. A garbage bag of lawn clippings dumped across my driveway one morning, spray paint on my mailbox spelling thief in shaky letters. And then, one night, my cameras caught her pacing the property line, muttering into her phone, gesturing wildly at the wooden post where Miguel's laminated survey hung. When I showed the footage to Carla, she didn't even flinch. She's spiraling. Good. Document everything. The more she lashes out, the worse it'll be for her. But even Carla wasn't prepared for what came next. One afternoon, a knock echoed at my door. When I opened it, a man in a button-up shirt stood there, clipboard in hand. Independent assessor, he introduced himself, hired to evaluate encroachments for a private client. His eyes flicked nervously toward Linda's house. I almost laughed. You don't need to waste your time. The court already ruled. She's the one encroaching. He shifted uncomfortably. I still have to do my job. I stepped aside, arms crossed, and watched him snap photos of my house, my fence, even my solar panels. It was theater, a last gasp attempt to collect evidence that contradicted the court's decision. When he finished, he avoided my gaze, muttered a thank you, and hurried back to his car. The very next day, Carla filed a motion for contempt of court, citing Linda's harassment. But the real explosion came when I started digging deeper into her past. The Utah case I'd uncovered had been just the tip of the iceberg. With a few more searches, I found a lawsuit in Nevada nearly 10 years earlier, involving, you guessed it, an HOA where she'd served as vice president. Different names, same pattern, falsified surveys, claims of shared property, and threats of demolition. She'd lost there too. It was a chilling realization. Linda wasn't just unlucky with neighbors, she was a predator, repeating the same scam state after state. Change her last name, pick a new town, buy a piece of land with messy records, then bully whoever lived nearby until she either gained control or got chased out. And this time, she thought I'd be her easiest target. When I handed the files to Carla, her eyes lit up. This is exactly what we needed. We'll amend the case to show a history of fraudulent behavior. Judges love patterns. She's toast. Meanwhile, Linda grew bolder in her defiance. One night, at nearly midnight, I caught her on camera again, this time standing over the property stake. Crowbar in hand, she yanked it free, tossed it aside, then looked straight into the lens of the owl camera. Her lips curled into a smirk as if daring me to react. The next morning, I printed still frames of the footage and dropped them off at the sheriff's office. The deputy sighed, flipping through the images. She's pushing her luck. We'll send someone to warn her. But Linda wasn't just reckless, she was desperate. The fines, the looming demolition, the legal fees, it was all crushing her. And desperation makes people dangerous. A week later, I woke up to find tire tracks cutting across my front yard, deep grooves where someone had driven straight through in the middle of the night. My trail cameras picked it up, Linda's SUV, headlights off, barreling across my property before swerving back onto the road. It was intimidation, pure and simple. Carla filed for a restraining order. By then, the court wasn't amused. Judge Morales granted it immediately, warning Linda that any further trespass would result in jail time. But even that didn't stop her. The demolition deadline loomed, and Linda did everything she could to stall. She filed appeals with no legal basis, mailed rambling letters to the county clerk, even tried to host a community meeting in her driveway, claiming she was the